A lone giraffe approaches a safari jeep. Tourists laugh, snapping photos. But then, silence falls. The giraffe's eyes lock with one passenger. What happened next? Nobody saw it coming. Before we start, please subscribe to the channel. Your subscription means everything to us, and it's the only way for the stories of these beautiful animals, who often suffer in silence, to reach more people. It helps us keep our work going. Please subscribe now. We know that God will reward you twice for helping these animals have their voices heard. The African savanna stretched endlessly under the blazing sun, a golden sea of grass swaying in the hot breeze. Dust swirled around a beaten-up safari jeep, its faded green paint barely visible beneath layers of red earth. Inside, a group of eager tourists fidgeted with excitement, their eyes scanning the horizon for any sign of wildlife. Tom, their guide, was a man weathered by years under the African sun. His leathery skin crinkled as he squinted against the glare, one hand resting easily on the steering wheel. "Keep your eyes peeled, folks," he drawled, his voice carrying the weight of countless safaris. "Out here, you never know what might." His words died in his throat as gasps erupted from the group. There, emerging from the golden grass like a vision, stood a majestic giraffe. Its spots gleamed like polished amber in the afternoon light, its long neck stretching towards the cloudless sky. "Wow," whispered Sarah, a young woman seated in the front. Her camera was already in her hands, clicking furiously as she tried to capture the moment. "It's so close." The giraffe moved with an impossible grace for such a large creature. Each step was deliberate, silent as it approached the vehicle. Excited chatter filled the air as tourists jostled for the best view, elbows bumping as they reached for their phones and cameras. Tom's brow furrowed, a flicker of uncertainty crossing his face. In all his years guiding safaris, he'd never seen a giraffe act quite like this. They were usually shy creatures, keeping their distance from vehicles and humans alike. But this one was different. "All right, everyone, stay calm," he cautioned, unable to keep a note of unease from his voice. "Wild animals can be unpredictable. Let's just sit tight and see what happens." But the giraffe showed no signs of aggression. It simply walked closer and closer. Its hooves made no sound on the parched earth, yet each step seemed to echo in the sudden hush that had fallen over the group. The laughter died down, replaced by an eerie silence. An almost electric tension filled the air as the giraffe's enormous head loomed over the jeep, its liquid brown eyes, fringed by impossibly long lashes, swept over the awestruck faces before it. Then, suddenly, those eyes locked onto Sarah. Time seemed to stop. The world narrowed to just the two of them, woman and giraffe, locked in a gaze that seemed to transcend understanding. Sarah's breath caught in her throat, her camera forgotten in her lap. The giraffe's eyes held her, filled with an intelligence that seemed almost human. "Oh my God," someone whispered from the back of the jeep. "What's it doing?" Slowly, so slowly it hardly seemed to be moving at all, the giraffe lowered its head towards Sarah. Panic flashed across her face for a moment, her body tensing as if to pull away. Tom's hand inched towards the ignition, ready to speed away if needed. But Sarah remained frozen, transfixed by those eyes. The giraffe's nose was now inches from Sarah's face. She could feel its warm breath, see every detail of its velvety muzzle. Her heart pounded so loudly she was sure everyone could hear it. And then, the giraffe gently pressed its forehead against hers. A collective gasp rippled through the Jeep. Sarah's eyes widened in shock, then softened. Tears began to stream down her cheeks, leaving tracks in the dust that clung to her skin. I can't believe it," she choked out, her voice barely above a whisper. "It's him. It's really him." Tom's jaw dropped, his usual composure shattered by the scene unfolding before him. "What do you mean, him?" he asked, bewilderment clear in his voice. Sarah's voice shook as she explained, never breaking eye contact with the giraffe. "When I was a little girl, maybe 7 or 8, I volunteered at a wildlife sanctuary back home. There was a baby giraffe there, orphaned by poachers." Her hand reached out, trembling slightly as it touched the giraffe's soft muzzle. "I bottle-fed him every day for months. I called him Spots." The other tourists watched in stunned silence as Sarah continued, her words tumbling out faster now, as if a dam had broken. "When he was strong enough, they released him back into the wild. I never dreamed I'd see him again." She laughed through her tears, a sound of pure joy and disbelief. But those eyes, I'd know them anywhere. If this incredible reunion has touched your heart, make sure to subscribe for more amazing animal stories like this one. As if understanding her words, the giraffe, Spots, nuzzled Sarah's hand. His long, purple tongue snaked out, gently licking her palm in a gesture that was at once familiar and utterly surreal. Tom shook his head, his eyes wide with amazement. "In all my years, I've never seen anything like this. The odds, it's just impossible." But there they were, woman and giraffe, reunited against all odds in the vast African wilderness. The other tourists watched, spellbound, as Sarah stroked Spot's long neck, murmuring to him softly, words of comfort, of remembrance, of a love that had somehow endured across years and continents. "Do you remember the day we met?" "Spots?" Sarah asked, her voice carrying clearly in the hushed silence. "You were so small, so scared. Your legs were all wobbly, and you couldn't even stand up straight." Spots blinked slowly, his long lashes brushing against her cheek. It was as if he was hanging on her every word, reliving those long-ago memories alongside her. "I stayed with you all night," Sarah continued, lost in the past. "You were so weak, we didn't know if you'd make it, but I promised you then that I'd never give up on you. And look at you now." Her voice trailed off as she took in the magnificent creature before her. Spots had grown from that fragile orphan into a towering giant, strong and healthy and wild. Yet somehow, impossibly, he had remembered her. For nearly an hour, Spots stayed by the Jeep. He seemed reluctant to leave Sarah's side, bending down periodically to touch his forehead to hers. It was as if he was making up for lost time, savoring every moment with his long-lost friend. The other tourists, initially frozen in shock, began to relax. They spoke in hushed whispers, not wanting to break the spell of the moment. Cameras clicked softly, capturing this once-in-a-lifetime encounter. As the sun began to dip towards the horizon, painting the sky in brilliant shades of orange and pink, Spots finally took a step back. He gazed at Sarah one last time, his eyes full of what could only be described as love. Then, with the same quiet grace that had marked his approach, he turned and walked back into the savanna. Sarah watched him go, tears still glistening on her cheeks. "Thank you," she whispered, her words carried away by the gentle breeze. "Thank you for remembering me." The jeep ride back to camp was subdued, everyone lost in thought about the miracle they had witnessed. Tom kept shaking his head, muttering about 1 in a million chances. But Sarah sat quietly, a serene smile on her face, her hand resting on the spot where Spots had touched her. As they bumped along the dusty track, the golden light of sunset giving way to the deep purples of twilight, Sarah's mind wandered back to those days at the sanctuary. She remembered the countless nights spent sleeping on a cot next to Spot's enclosure, waking every few hours to give him his bottle, the way his knobby knees would knock together as he took his first wobbly steps, the sound of his gentle snuffling as he nuzzled into her neck, seeking comfort. She thought of the day they released him, how her heart had broken even as she celebrated his return to the wild. She had always wondered what had become of him, always hoped he was out there living his best life, but to know he remembered her after all these years. That night, as the group gathered around the campfire, the talk was of nothing but Sarah and Spots. The flames danced, casting flickering shadows across faces still filled with wonder and disbelief. "It's like something out of a fairy tale," one man said, his voice hushed with awe. "A reminder that there's magic in this world, if we just know where to look." Sarah nodded, her eyes reflecting the dancing flames. "I always hoped Spots was out there, living his best life," she said softly. "But to know he remembered me after all these years." She trailed off, overcome with emotion. Tom, who had been uncharacteristically quiet since their return, finally spoke up. "You know, in all my years as a guide, I've seen some pretty incredible things. Lions taking down elephants, wildebeest migrations that stretched as far as the eye could see. But this..." He shook his head, a look of wonder on his weathered face. "This is something else entirely." A young couple, honeymooners from America, leaned forward eagerly. "But how is it possible," the woman asked, "for a wild animal to remember someone after so long?" Sarah smiled, her gaze distant as she stared into the flames. "I don't know if I can explain it," she said slowly, "but I think love leaves a mark on all of us, human or animal. It doesn't matter. When you care for something, truly care for it with all your heart, it creates a connection that can't be broken." Her words hung in the air, mingling with the smoke from the campfire. The group fell silent, each person lost in their own thoughts, their own memories of connections formed and lost. "You know," Tom said after a while, his voice gruff with emotion, "what happened today? It's not just about you and Spots. It's about all of us. About the way we interact with the world around us." Sarah looked up, curious. "What do you mean?" Tom gestured to the darkness beyond their circle of firelight, where the sounds of night creatures filled the air, We come out here, to the wild, thinking we're separate from it all. Observers, but we're not. We're part of it. Every action we take, every connection we make, it ripples out in ways we can't even imagine. The young honeymoon couple nodded, their hands intertwined. It makes you think, doesn't it? The man said. About the impact we have, not just on other people, but on animals, on the environment. Exactly, Tom agreed. What happened with Sarah and Spots, it's extraordinary, but in a way, it's happening all around us, all the time. Every time we show kindness to an animal, every time we make a choice that protects the environment, we're creating connections, bonds that might not be as visible as what we saw today, but they're just as real. Sarah's eyes lit up with understanding. It's like ripples in a pond, she said. You throw in a stone and you can see the immediate impact, but those ripples keep going long after you can no longer see them. Precisely, Tom nodded. And sometimes, if you're very lucky, you get to see those ripples come back to you, like you did today. The group fell silent again, each person contemplating the profound truth in Tom's words. The crackling of the fire and the distant call of a hyena were the only sounds breaking the stillness of the African night. Finally, an older woman who had been quiet throughout the evening spoke up. So what do we do with this knowledge? She asked. How do we create more ripples? Sarah smiled, her face glowing in the firelight. I think it starts with awareness, she said, with really seeing the world around us and understanding our place in it. It's about recognizing that every living thing has value, has feelings, has a right to exist and thrive. Tom nodded in agreement. And it's about taking action, even in small ways. Maybe it's volunteering at an animal shelter, or making choices that reduce your impact on the environment, or simply taking the time to really connect with the animals in your life, whether they're pets or wild creatures you encounter. It's about empathy, the young honeymooner added, trying to see the world through other eyes, not just human eyes, but the eyes of animals, of the earth itself. As the night wore on, the conversation continued to flow. Stories were shared of beloved pets, of wildlife encounters, of moments when the line between human and animal seemed to blur. Each tale was a testament to the incredible bonds that can form between species and to the transformative power of compassion and connection. If these stories have touched your heart and opened your eyes to the incredible bonds between humans and animals, don't forget to like and subscribe for more inspiring tales from the wild. As the fire burned low and the stars wheeled overhead, Sarah found herself filled with a sense of purpose she hadn't felt in years. Her encounter with Spots wasn't just a miraculous reunion. It was a call to action, a reminder of the impact one person could have and the responsibility that came with it. You know, she said, as the group prepared to turn in for the night, I think I know what I need to do when I get home. Tom raised an eyebrow. Oh? Sarah nodded, her eyes shining with determination. I'm going to get back involved with wildlife conservation. Maybe start volunteering at sanctuaries again. There are so many animals out there who need help. who need someone to care for them the way I cared for Spots." The others murmured their approval, inspired by her commitment. "But it's not just about the big gestures," Sarah continued. "It's about the little things too. Being more mindful of the products I buy, the choices I make, trying to live in a way that creates positive ripples, even if I can't always see where they lead." As the group dispersed to their tents, the conversation continued in hushed tones. Plans were made, promises to do better, to be more aware, to make a difference. The encounter with Spots had touched something deep within each of them, awakening a sense of connection to the natural world that many had forgotten or neglected. Sarah lay awake long into the night, listening to the sounds of the savanna, the distant roar of a lion, the laughter of hyenas, the rustle of wind through grass. She thought of Spots, out there somewhere in the vastness of Africa, living the life he was meant to live, and she felt profoundly grateful, not just for the miracle of their reunion, but for the lesson it had taught her. In the morning, as the group prepared to leave camp, there was a palpable sense of change in the air. It wasn't just the golden light of dawn or the promise of a new day. It was the feeling that each person carried within them, a renewed sense of wonder, of responsibility, of connection to the world around them. As they climbed into the Jeep for one last game drive before heading to the airport, Tom turned to Sarah with a smile. "You know," he said, "in all my years of guiding, I've seen a lot of people come and go. Most of them leave with some nice photos and memories. But this group, I think you're all leaving with something more." Sarah nodded, understanding exactly what he meant. "We're leaving with a mission," she said simply. As the Jeep pulled away from camp, kicking up a cloud of dust in its wake, Sarah's eyes scanned the horizon. Part of her hoped for one last glimpse of Spots, but she knew that wasn't necessary. He had given her something far more valuable than another meeting. He had reminded her of who she was and who she could be. The African sun climbed higher in the sky as they drove, illuminating a world teeming with life and possibility. Sarah felt a surge of excitement for what lay ahead, not just the adventures of the day, but the changes she would make when she returned home. She knew that the ripples from this experience would continue long after she left Africa, spreading out in ways she couldn't even imagine. As they crested a hill, the savanna spread out before them in all its wild beauty. Sarah took a deep breath, filling her lungs with the scent of sun-warmed earth and wild grasses. In that moment, she made a silent promise to Spots, to herself, to the world around her. A promise to remember, to care, to act. A promise to keep creating ripples, no matter how small, in the hope that someday, somehow, they might come back to her in ways as beautiful and unexpected as a giraffe's kiss in the African sun. As the Jeep drove on, carrying them towards new horizons and new possibilities, Sarah smiled. She knew that this was not an end, but a beginning, a first step on a journey of compassion, connection, and wonder that would last a lifetime. And somewhere out there, in the vast expanse of the savanna, a giraffe named Spots roamed free, carrying with him the memory of a love that had spanned years and continents. a living testament to the extraordinary bonds that can form between humans and animals, and to the enduring power of compassion. As the group's safari adventure drew to a close, each person carried with them not just memories and photographs, but a newfound sense of purpose. The story of Sarah and Spots had touched them all in different ways, igniting a spark of awareness that would continue to burn long after they returned to their everyday lives. For Sarah, the journey was just beginning. As the plane lifted off from African soil, carrying her back to her home halfway across the world, her mind was already racing with plans and possibilities. She thought of the wildlife sanctuaries in her area, the conservation groups she could join, the changes she could make in her daily life to reduce her impact on the environment. But it wasn't just about grand gestures or sweeping changes. Sarah realized that the true power of her experience lay in the small, everyday moments. The way she would now pause to really look at the birds in her backyard, marveling at their intricate beauty. The extra care she would take in choosing products that were ethically sourced and environmentally friendly. The conversations she would have with friends and family, sharing her story and inspiring others to see the world through new eyes. In the weeks and months that followed, Sarah's life began to transform in subtle but profound ways. She volunteered at a local animal shelter, spending her weekends caring for abandoned pets and wildlife in need of rehabilitation. Each time she bottle-fed a baby squirrel or helped an injured bird regain its strength to fly, she thought of Spots and the incredible bond they had shared. She became more involved in her community, organizing nature walks and educational programs to help others connect with the wildlife around them. Children listened wide-eyed as she told the story of her reunion with Spots, their young minds opening to the possibility of deep connections with the natural world. At home, Sarah made changes too. She planted a garden filled with native plants, creating a haven for local birds and insects. She reduced her use of plastic, became more mindful of her water consumption, and made choices that reflected her newfound commitment to living in harmony with the world around her. And as she had predicted, the ripples of her experience continued to spread outward in unexpected ways. A colleague, inspired by her story, decided to sponsor a rescued elephant at a sanctuary in Thailand. A neighbor, after attending one of Sarah's nature walks, began advocating for the protection of local wetlands. Even Sarah's parents, initially skeptical of her African epiphany, found themselves looking at the world differently, marveling at the intricate web of life that surrounded them. But it wasn't always easy. There were days when the problems facing the natural world seemed overwhelming, when the task of making a difference felt impossible. On those days, Sarah would close her eyes and remember the feeling of Spots' forehead pressed against hers, the look in his eyes that spoke of recognition and love across the years. And she would find the strength to keep going, to keep creating those ripples of change. 1 year after her African adventure, Sarah received an email that brought tears to her eyes. It was from Tom, the safari guide who had witnessed her extraordinary reunion with Spots. Attached was a photo that took Sarah's breath away. There, standing tall and proud against the backdrop of the African savanna, was Spots, and beside him, barely reaching his knees, was a baby giraffe, its spots still fuzzy and indistinct. "Thought you'd want to see this." Tom's message read, "Spotted them, pun intended, on a recent drive. Looks like your old friend is a dad now. The circle of life continues." Sarah sat back in her chair, overwhelmed by a wave of emotion, joy, wonder, and a profound sense of connection washed over her. She thought of the long journey that had brought Spots to this moment, from orphaned calf to magnificent bull, now passing on his own legacy to a new generation. And she thought of her own journey, the way her life had been transformed by a single moment of connection in the vast African wilderness. She thought of all the lives she had touched since then, all the small changes and big dreams that had been set in motion. In that moment, Sarah understood something fundamental about the nature of compassion and connection. It wasn't a linear path, a simple cause and effect. It was a web, intricate and far-reaching, each strand connected to countless others in ways that might never be fully understood. Her reunion with Spots hadn't just been a heartwarming story or a personal epiphany. It was a reminder of the profound interconnectedness of all living things, a call to recognize the ripples we create with every action, every choice, every moment of kindness or indifference. As she looked at the photo of Spots and his baby, Sarah made a silent vow to keep learning, keep growing, keep spreading the message of compassion and connection. To never underestimate the power of a single act of kindness or the far-reaching effects of love, whether between humans, between species, or between all living things and the planet we share. The story of Sarah and Spots was far from over. In fact, it was just beginning, a story that would continue to unfold in countless lives touched, countless hearts opened, countless ripples spreading outward into the world. And somewhere out there, on the sun-drenched plains of Africa, a giraffe named Spots continued to roam free, carrying with him the memory of a love that had transcended time and distance, a living testament to the extraordinary bonds that can form between humans and animals, and to the enduring power of compassion to change lives and shape the world. As the sun sets on this tale, we're reminded that every day brings new opportunities to connect, to show kindness, to make a difference. What ripples will you create today? How will you honor the interconnectedness of all living things? The choice is yours, and the possibilities are endless. Remember, every act of compassion, no matter how small, has the power to change the world. Just as Sarah's love for a baby giraffe created ripples that are still spreading today, your actions can have far-reaching effects that you may never fully know. So go forth with open eyes and an open heart. Look for the spots in your own life, the unexpected connections, the moments of pure wonder, the opportunities to show kindness and make a difference. For in doing so, you become part of a greater story, a story of hope, of healing, and of the incredible bonds that unite all living things. And who knows, someday, somehow, those ripples you create might come back to you in ways as beautiful and unexpected as a giraffe's kiss in the African sun.